Welcome back, trainers, to the final of the Lanarken mid-season showdown. My name is Ben Kiriakou, Cuckoo by name, Cuckoo by nature, and of course we are here with Charlie Merriman.
Merry by name, merry by nature. Absolutely, could not be more thrilled to be here at the finals of our Lanarken mid-season showdown, and we have our fantastic trainers ready on stage. Joshua van Sandijk and Kai Elst. Now, Joshua from the Netherlands, Kai from Belgium itself, of course, on home turf. And two fascinating teams, both with Pokemon that we're far less familiar with at this stage in the Regulation Set F metagame. Here's a little taster. Gallade, Hatterene, Hisuian Lilligant, Iron Bundle, Entei. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, indeed. And of course, on Kai's side, we've got the single strike Urshifu, the Ogerpon Wellspring, Raging Bolt, Iron Bundle, Fluttermane, and Entei. And that is a very, very cool Entei carrying the choice band that did him so well in his top 4 match. Now, Joshua made it all the way to the finals yesterday in our first mid-season showdown and was felled by Yost, who was able to pilot a similar-looking Trick Room team, just piloted that a little bit better. A quite quick matchup between these two players, and of course, looking at the matchup between our players today in the mid-season showdown, we're looking at some fast offensive pressure coming from Joshua. The question I've got is whether or not Kai is going to be able to meet it toe for toe.
I'm thinking that sort of in terms of appearance, a 2-2 composition over on Joshua's side of the field. Indeed, Hatterene, that's kind of a vibe. Gallade, Hisuian Lilligant, that's kind of a vibe. But then Urshifu Torkoal, I don't think we can call them a pair, really. But anyway, a different, I guess the kind of facial expression's kind of similar. But yes, absolutely. How are these teams going to match up into each other there, the way they represent themselves aside? Well, Iron Bundle over there. So it's running Hydro Pump and Freeze Dry and Icy Wind in order to drop the speeds, but presumably Joshua's going to be angling to set up Trick Room here. So. That seems to be the best call right now. Of course, you do have bulkier Pokemon like the Raging Bolt over on Kai's side of the field, but in Trick Room going for massive eruptions or Gallade threatening big damage as we saw, kind of the star of the show of yesterday's mid-season showdown. Is it going to be the same here now? It's carrying that clear Amulet. There isn't an Incineroar in this final, which is a very strange thing to say in Regulation ZF, but here we are. And so that clear Amulet potentially not putting in as much work as it could have done before. Where there's a Hisuian Lilligant, there can be a Sleep Powder, and there are no safety goggles over on Kai's side of the field. But there is the Ogerpon, which of course is part Grass type. That's not going to be put to sleep unless it terastallizes.
Well, let's see. We're getting into game 1 here at the finals of the Lanarken mid-season showdown.
Let's go.
It's Gallade back onto the field. It won the mid-season showdown yesterday, paired up with the Indeedee, of course, setting the psychic terrain, but it's all-out offense coming from Kai's side of the field this turn. Entei coming out, Raging Bolt coming out, putting on a lot of pressure. Entei, of course, carrying the choice band, and I'm wondering, between them, is it enough to be able to knock out the Indeedee this turn? Kind of take away the ability for Joshua to go for that redirection, so you kind of have to trade, if you're Joshua, redirection for getting the Trick Room up, bringing in one of your offensive Pokemon, but does it have enough to be able to knock out the Raging Bolt in the mid-stages of this game? We'll have to see.
Well, you certainly can't go for an extreme speed on turn 1 with that psychic terrain set up. Is Ogerpon joining the field instead of Raging Bolt? Indeed, it is going to be doing what it tends to do best, going for the follow me, becoming the center of attention. It loves to be in that position in the spotlight. Here comes Sacred Fire. It does get the burn, so that Indeedee is now on a timer here on the field. Its health whittling away. Gallade free to set up that Trick Room, and given the Pokemon currently out for Kai on the other side of the field, it's loving being there.
It really, really is. Gallade's Psycho Cut is going to be doing so much damage. Ogerpon can't even Terror in this situation like it can against a Hatterene, like it can against a Torkoal, to improve its special defensive capabilities against this physical Gallade. And of course, now that we've seen that the Entei is locked into Sacred Fire, and that can now be redirected into the Indeedee, it looks like Gallade has its pick of knockouts. Now, Entei cannot protect itself because of the choice band. So it's an open target here, almost open season for this Gallade going into this turn. But Hatterene will be the switch-in of choice here.
Hatterene joining the Psychic Terrain. Sacred Sword looking sharp into Entei. Sacred Fire is going to be connecting into Gallade enough to secure the one-hit knockout, as offensively threatening the Gallade is, its defenses cannot have the same said for them. Ivy Cudgel connecting down into the Hatterene. That's a huge amount of damage as well. Even though we're in Trick Room, Kai seems to be able to just brute force their way through it.
Well, that Entei has been very well trained, and I'm just wondering if I'm doing the calculations wrong, whether or not Psycho Cut would have been more damage in the Psychic Terrain. I think it would have been.
Yeah,
and
should have been.
Would have been enough to pick up the knockout.
Maybe predicting an Urshifu switch in, for example.
That's it. That's what you've got to be always aware of in these sort of games. You have to be precise. You have to be targeting in the damage that you're doing. So yeah. Even if Psycho Cut would have been able to knock out the Entei, maybe it was the correct call. But now the Hatterene is the main damage-dealing Pokemon of choice. I say that, thinking that the Urshifu is not going to do damage as well. But that does mean that there is more advantage for the Ogerpon now to go for a Terra Water and start dishing out big Ivy Cudgels that way.
Not this turn, however. Oh my goodness, look at that expanding force. Of course, secures the knockout onto Entei. Ogerpon brought down incredibly low, even though terrestrializing could have given it that boost to its special defenses, but close combat just going to neutralize that threat anyway, so a good call not to go for that. That Urshifu taking a drop to its defenses and special defenses, and this is not a Focus Sash variant. It is holding the choice band, and so that could well come into play later on in the game if it's able to be dealt with in one hit. But there is still a huge amount of Trick Room turns remaining on the field as Urshifu and Raging Bolt join the fray. Now, Raging Bolt is one of the slower Pokemon, and it's certainly a bulkier Pokemon, so this now has to be the focus for Joshua to deal with, amply supported by the Urshifu single strike of Kai's own.
Now, I'm thinking whether or not this Raging Bolt is going to be able to knock out this Urshifu in one, given that the Urshifu has had a defense and special defense drop from the close combat.
Yeah.
If that's the case, Urshifu on Kai's side of the field is carrying the Focus Sash, so Hatterene isn't going to be able to knock it out in one. Almost certainly the Raging Bolt would be the slower between Urshifu and Raging Bolt, and so in Trick Room would be hitting first. If that's not the case, then this Urshifu on Joshua's side of the field gets a little bit more of an opportunity to attack, but we'll have to see how exactly that plays out as we start the turn with Raging Bolt going for its Terra Fairy.
Raging Bolt loves the Terra Fairy. Look at that heart on top of its head in the clouds. That's going to be Detect coming out from Kai's Urshifu now. So now this Raging Bolt is so much better prepared against the Urshifu single strike, but it does have access to Poison Jab over on Joshua's side of the field. The same cannot be said for Kai's. So there's a little bit of chip from the Dazzling Gleam. Of course, that could have been huge damage onto the Urshifu over on Kai's side of the field. The Life Orb chip isn't enough to pick up the knockout onto the Hatterene, nor is the follow-up Snarl. Of course, close combat going through the Protect, bringing down the Urshifu over on Kai's side of the field to its Focus Sash. So that really is an opening now for Joshua to capitalize on.
I think so, yeah. I think there was definitely an opportunity for the Raging Bolt to go for the Draco Meteor there, go a little bit on the defensive. Maybe Kai thinking that the Snarl would be enough after the chip of Life Orb, that damage that Hatterene took there. So you go for the Terra Fairy, you make it so that close combat is not going to be doing very effective damage on this turn. Very hard to click Expanding Force when a Dark-type Pokemon is on the field. And yeah, I think Kai wanted to take a little bit more advantage of that. But it looks like the Detect coming out. Is that the double Detect?
That's the double Detect, absolutely. So that Urshifu is going to be safe, at least from Hatterene for this turn. Big boosted Expanding Force in the terrain coming out into the Raging Bolt, which is holding that Assault Vest. And going down to that Life Orb damage, granting Joshua a free switch in to the Pokemon in the back. That's a Draco Meteor. Is it going to connect? Yes, it is, onto the Urshifu on Joshua's side of the field. And thanks to those defense drops, that is going to be going down. So now for Joshua, it is just the Pokemon in the back, as the Trick Room is expiring and the Psychic Terrain disappears from the field. It's just the burned Indeedee. So it's looking like Kai has just about weathered this storm as well as they could.
Really, really well played there, going for the more offensive move a little bit later on. Of course, worth noting that that double detect didn't actually make any impact whatsoever because the expanding force, rather than the dazzling gleam, came out from the Hatterene before it in fact fainted. So yeah, really nice way for Kai to be able to navigate their way through that game. And looking a little bit back through how we got to the end of that game with Kai winning, I know Kai wasn't very confident in this matchup going into the finals, but it really was that decision to dig your heels in and keep that Entei on the field and use its Sacred Fire to be able to knock out that Gallade.
Yeah, Gallade was huge in the early game, but then it just went down so easily. And that's where Ndidi is huge for Gallade, being able to redirect and keep it a little bit safer. But as you said, Gallade came out with a Sacred Sword rather than the Psycho Cut into the Entei, which would have been huge damage, but of course, again, potentially predicting a switch into the single strike style Urshifu, which of course takes no damage from psychic type moves. So really well played out there by Kai. Kai is one game up. Of course, Joshua reached the finals yesterday on Saturday here at the Lanarken Mid-Season Showdown. Are they going to be able to go all the way today? Well, Kai is doing their best to put a spanner in the works, and potentially time for Joshua to consider a different game mode.
Could be. I mean, the Urshifu single strike is the thing that really makes this matchup a little bit more difficult for Joshua, both in the fact that it can do lots of damage, it's carrying the Focus Sash, and Trick Room teams don't like playing up against Pokemon with Focus Sash because, well, you have to commit so many resources to just doing one hit point worth of damage in the 4 turns that you have to take advantage of that speed control that you're opting for. And yeah, there's a few things that just, and that's all this on the Raging Bolt. I think Kai's game in Game 1 really took advantage of all of those things. It's whether or not Kai can continue to make those reads, to continue to get those things right, because if you let Joshua get one good turn in this situation, or if Joshua makes a really great call, let's put it a different way, then it's very easy for Joshua to then start steamrolling the game from there.
Yeah, steamroll is certainly what Joshua likes to do, and again, a huge achievement to have reached the finals of both days here in Lanarken. But here we have our lead. That's Entei and its Raging Bolt over on Kai's side of the field. And once again, the Ndidi and Gallade coming out for Joshua. So now, do you play the mind games of going for a big boosted Psycho Cut, or is the Urshifu going to be switching in? Do you set up that Trick Room? Do you just keep the Gallade safe with a Follow Me? Well, of course, the wide guard there on the Gallade can be huge for spread type moves that unlikely to come out actually this time over on Kai's side of the field, unless there is something like the Flutter Mane in the back. But Raging Bolt, really bulky, it can't set up, it's holding the Assault Vest, so it could be here for a long time. This Gallade shouldn't be.
No, I mean, unless it goes for its Terra Fire there. We saw that in the finals yesterday, this Gallade going for Terra Fire, and it's doing it yet again. If the Entei locked into a fire type move, it's going to be doing a lot less damage. I mean, still going to be doing a good chunk to that Gallade.
Oh,
we see
nice.
it here. Sacred Fire.
Oh, still so much damage.
50% damage, yeah. Raging Bolt going for the Snarl. Ndidi actually avoiding that attack. Psycho Cut coming in here does the same amount of damage. I just checked this while we were getting into the game. Psycho Cut in Psychic Terrain and Sacred Sword are very similar in the amount of damage that they do. So yeah, you've got to say that the Sacred Sword was definitely the right call for Game 1, and Psycho Cut versus Sacred Sword this time, well, I mean, it's a toss-up, right?
Yeah, exactly. And now this Gallade on such low health, and the Entei, of course, cannot go for any extreme speeds in order to pick it up. It didn't take the drop to its special attack because it's holding that clear amulet, preventing any drops there. Indeed, going to be going to the back, hopefully being able to set up Psychic Terrain on a future turn in the game. Here comes Urshifu joining the field. It is the single strike variant for Joshua. It's holding the choice band. That's Entei running back to its kennel and coming out instead. Here comes Kai's own Urshifu. So they're staring each other down, these bears, from across the weird terrain. A huge Sacred Sword call into that slot, bringing Urshifu down to the Focus Sash.
And yeah, that's a really, really big call to be making there. Draco Meteor coming out from the Raging Bolt, but Gallade avoiding the attack and not taking any damage whatsoever. That Gallade is going to be sticking on the field for one more turn. Now the Urshifu is staring down the other Urshifu. Well, you can't protect against an Urshifu. Single strike or rapid strike, doesn't matter, the moves go through. And so a Wicked Blow or a close combat, depending on how Joshua wants to play this, into that 1 HP Urshifu. No priority because, of course, of that Psychic Terrain. And Gallade gets to launch a Sacred Sword, or in fact a Psycho Cut in this case would be a little bit better against the Raging Bolt that could Terra, as it looks like it is, into that Terra Fairy.
It's once again Terra Fairy, the Pokemon of choice for Kai, into the Raging Bolt. Now, Kai's Raging Bolt is only running Draco Meteor as its big non-priority damaging move, hence having to lock into that to secure the knockout onto the Gallade, but of course it missed. Already brought down to such low health by the Urshifu there, or by the Gallade there, Wicked Blow connecting down into Kai's Urshifu in order to pick up the knockout. Again, a very excessive Wicked Blow for just that 1 HP, but secure the knockout, it certainly does. This is a dynamic, fast-paced game, trainers, and we're on the edge of our seats.
This Gallade is also on the edge of its seat right now because it's right on the edge of being knocked out. Of course, the Draco Meteor would have done that before, but the extra damage this Gallade is going to be able to put out because that Draco Meteor didn't connect is absolutely phenomenal. 2-hit KOing this Raging Bolt, and now Ogerpon joining the fray, going to have to decide for Kai whether or not he wants to go for the Follow Me. That is what has been locked in. Take away the damage-dealing moves from the Raging Bolt, but this time the Draco Meteor going into the Urshifu, it hasn't launched a close combat, so it can take it.
A bulkier Urshifu being run by Joshua, taking that Draco Meteor. Wicked Blow connecting down to secure the knockout onto Ogerpon. Right now, it's seeming like Gallade and Urshifu are best buddies, and they certainly complement each other. Psychic fighting paired with Dark fighting, those two opposite types there, as Entei is going to be joining the field. It's still on such low health from earlier, but look at that. Joshua has all 4 Pokemon remaining, albeit the Urshifu and Gallade are on such low health, but deciding to just go on the slice and punch mode of playing.
And doing it to great effect there. Neither Pokemon, of course, on Kai's side of the field can protect themselves whatsoever. Again, no priority moves. The Psychic Terrain just hanging on the field for as long as it really needs to. Psycho Cut there, knocking out the Raging Bolt, just as comeuppance for not managing to connect that Draco Meteor earlier. Calling back to it once again. Wicked Blow into the Entei, knocking it out, and it will be game 2 of this mid-season showdown going to Joshua.
Could not be more thrilled for Joshua taking this to a game 3. These trainers, of course, are going to be feeling the pressure right now. This is it. All comes down to this one game between Joshua and Kai, between the Netherlands and indeed Belgium. Joshua having reached the finals yesterday. Can they go all the way this time? Now, you can completely switch up your game plan if you are Joshua, because you have access to this Hisuian Lilligant mode that we saw come up so huge in the top 4 match that we featured from Joshua. But then, if you're dealing with something like a Sleep Powder, that can always miss. You could switch in an Ogerpon or something in order to soak up that Grass-type move. Solar Blade did huge damage earlier as well, but then so did Close Combat. It's 100% accurate. You've also got After You, and then there's Torkola to set up the Sun, the booster activating the Chlorophyll ability of that Hisuian Lilligant. So it might not be the most reliable mode of play, but it could be something to catch Kai off guard.
You definitely, if you're going for that option, want to be thinking about the Sleep Powder into the Raging Bolt, because that Sun not only benefits the Chlorophyll on the Hisuian Lilligant, but also the Photosynthesis on the Raging Bolt. And of course, the Sacred Fire on the Entei. And we know how much damage that Sacred Fire did. Joshua in that game had to Terra the Gallade to even have a hope and a prayer of surviving that attack. And even then took too much damage to really have that Gallade be a mainstay for the rest of the match. It was only due to the Raging Bolt and maybe having its head above the clouds while it was aiming that Draco Meteor down onto the Gallade that
a little bit overcast.
A little bit overcast in that particular turn, that it was able to hang on there. So a very even match, and very great players coming into game 3 here at the mid-season showdown in Larkin. Let's see how it goes. No switching up from Joshua whatsoever, but Ogerpon joining the field alongside that Entei instead of the Raging Bolt.
Yes, so Entei and Ogerpon there, complementing that Fire, Water, Grass core, all in 2 Pokemon, as Indeedee and Gallade are there as well, threatening the huge offense. It's time to go all in on the Terrestrialization. Immediately trainers coming out on the Ogerpon Wellspring, so that's going to be boosting the special defense. Of course, Gallade being a physical attacker, a rare example of a psychic type physical attacker with a physical psychic type move. Ogerpon, however, is going to be boosting the power of its Ivy Cudgels, being a water type. Now, follow me coming out from the Indeedee for Joshua, and it is the Indeedee holding the safety goggles rather than something like a Rocky Helmet. Not that that would have activated chip damage on from the Ivy Cudgel, but Indeedee brought down to about 1/3 of its health, and the Sacred Fire is going to be finishing the job. No more redirection coming out for Joshua. What has this Gallade knocked into? It's going to be that Trick Room, paving the way for something lurking in the back.
A lot of these very linear Trick Room teams that really just want to set up Trick Room and get going with the damage dealing moves look very similar in the first turn. These Follow Me's and the Indeedee going down is completely telegraphed. But it's what happens after that that really matters. And now that the Ogerpon has gone for the Terror, it is under less threat from this Hatterene that's joined the fray. But the Gallade, as you said, a rare example of a physical type, psychic type Pokemon, and so does bypass that special defensive boost.
Now, this is absolutely huge for Joshua, that switch into the Urshifu. Did they call it right? Did they lock in with Sacred Sword to that slot? If Hatterene is going on the offensive with a Psychic Terror boosted, Psychic Terrain boosted, Expanding Force, this Hatterene expending all of its psychic energy, paired up with that Life Orb as well, to go for a huge chunk of damage onto the Ogerpon Wellspring. Perhaps that Ogerpon Wellspring needs to wipe those tears from its face. It's not down in one hit, but that is absolutely monumental. And there it is, the call of the Sacred Sword onto that slot, predicting that would be where the Urshifu was switching in order to resist that psychic damage.
But that's going to clear the way for an Ivy Cudgel. This Ogerpon hanging on with just a smidgen of hit points. It's going to be boosted by the Terror. There's no sun on the field from the Torkoal yet. The Gallade getting knocked out in 1. That's a big KO.
It's a big KO, and it's just 2 Pokemon remaining for Joshua. The Psychic type Bewitching Hatterene and the Hard as Steel, completely cold resolve Urshifu here on the field as well for Joshua, holding the Choice Band. Sucker Punches, not an option. Psychic Terrain is still on the field, thankfully for Hatterene's Expanding Force as well. These Urshifu, how they're going to match up into each other. Look at the dwindling health bars, though, over on Kai's side of the field, but all 4 Pokemon remaining still. So real fast-paced, need to make these calls correct.
You definitely do. Detect from the Ogerpon, Spiky Shield from the Ogerpon, detect from the Urshifu. At least one of those Pokemon is going to get knocked out this turn because the Urshifu is going to break through that protect. So a nice double protect there, actually, making sure that you can get the next Pokemon in for free if you're Kai. But of course, it's going to be that Dark-type Urshifu that takes the brunt of this wicked blow, paving the way for this Psychic Terror Hatterene to be able to launch out Expanding Forces without having to worry about not hitting a Dark-type Pokemon.
Hatterene completely rewriting the script of Regulation ZF, saying, where have I been all along? Right here in Lanarken, threatening huge Psychic-type damage on the field. Here comes the Raging Bolt. This Raging Bolt cannot Terrestrialize away from into Fairy in order to take Urshifu's moves better. Of course, Urshifu for Joshua also has access to the Poison Jab. Ogerpon seems to be going down this very turn, having spent that Spiky Shield on the previous one. Question is, can Kai's Raging Bolt weather the storm? Can it rise above it with its head in the clouds? Everything that's happening down here on Earth.
Well, we'll have to see, because I'm not sure whether Dazzling Gleam or Expanding Force is going to do more damage to that Raging Bolt. What I do know is that it's going to do a lot of damage regardless of which move that Joshua actually clicks into here. I do prefer the Expanding Force because you're Terror boosted as well, because that Entei we know is in the back. So if the Ogerpon or the Raging Bolt switched in, the Entei would take neutral damage from that. Here's the Expanding Force going into these two Pokemon. Ogerpon definitely going to go down,
Oh.
not getting that double spiky shield, doing more than 50% to the Raging Bolt.
Absolutely monumental damage. Now the psychic terrain is also whittling away, paving the way potentially for extreme speed from the Entei. Here comes a Draco Meteor into the Urshifu. It's brought down very low, but no, not close enough to secure the knockout. Wicked Blow, huge into the Raging Bolt as well. This game could not be more fast-paced. That bulky Urshifu taking that Draco Meteor. It's got the choice band on as well. This Entei coming in saying, what did I miss? Well, the answer is a lot, and
Yeah.
you've got an uphill struggle in front of you.
Well, we're still in the Trick Room condition right now. This Entei carrying the choice band isn't going to be able to protect itself. It looks like Joshua is going to better his result from day one. Lanarkan mid-season showdown with an expanding force, single target, enough for a one-hit KO, and it is Joshua that is going to be our champion here on Sunday.
Huge congratulations to Joshua. The relief on Joshua's face right now to come second in the first MSS and then going all the way in the second with the same team, just knowing that matchup so well, knowing that sometimes you can go fast even though you're setting up Trick Room. You can do both. That's what Trick Room offers to you. Huge congratulations to Joshua. Kai played so well, of course, able to claim game one. Seemed like maybe Kai's Pokemon had the bulk required to see out some of the hyper offense that Joshua was going for, but ultimately Joshua just able to pivot around so well and making the calls as to what to Sacred Sword, predicting an Urshifu switch in.
Right, and that's really the story of, I think, game 2 and 3 compared to game 1. We saw in game 1 the Sacred Sword going into the Entei, it not being enough to take the knockout, and of course the Gallade hadn't gone for the Terra Fire and made itself take less damage from the Entei in that turn. But in games 2 and 3, calling the Sacred Sword, calling the Urshifu on the switch in, getting the Sacred Sword. I don't think Kai could have done much more in those games, though. I mean, for a player that was looking at the matchup and saying, yeah, do you know what, I've got absolutely no game plan. Well, it looked like Kai had quite a lot of a game plan in most of that set, just being able to, one, take the attacks from Gallade with Entei and respond, being able to use that Raging Bolt really, really effectively to put pressure on with Draco Meteor, put pressure on with just getting that chip damage after chip damage after chip damage, and using that Assault Vest really, really well. I thought Kai played really, really effectively.
Yeah, did so well to try and weather the storm that Joshua was providing on the field. Of course, Kai also doesn't have Trick Room as a move option on their team, so it's not as easy just being able to switch it off, make those dimensions go back to normal, trying to stall it out where possible with those protects. But of course, the Raging Bolt didn't have access to protect, holding that Assault Vest. But of course, the trade-off you make for that is making it bulkier, making it stick around on the field for that little bit longer. So cool to see Entei again as well here in Regulation Set F. And I mean, that's it really, isn't it? This is one of the final tournaments of Regulation Set F, and it's been won by a player who has been flipping the script on this regulation set all along, all weekend. And of course, Gallade also won yesterday on a team that also featured Iron Moth. So it just goes to show that even though we've had a few months now of Regulation Set F, it can still completely be redefined, and potentially there's a lot of untapped potential that we completely overlooked.
Well, we'll have to see what Regulation Set G is going to have to offer us in just a few days' time. Those restricted Pokemon coming in, kind of like Regulation Set B when the Paradox Pokemon came to join the party, so to speak, and they really did shake up the metagame, and we'll have to see how that goes. For the moment, though, we're going to be taking a short break here to get Joshua up on the stage and have a little bit of a talk to him about his experience across this weekend. Second place, followed by first place. It's been a very successful weekend, one way or the other, and I do want to hear a little bit more from him about both his weekend, of course, and his team too.